Hey, this is Jason and Brian. Today we're going to talk to you about the top coral fragging mistakes. Brian, take it away.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, whether you're fragging your coral because you're just out of space, you're trying to make a little extra money on the side, you're whatever, you want to trade with some friends, whatever the case may be, we're going to have some common mistakes for you, starting with using the improper tools.
Having the right tool for the job. So what you don't want to do is grab your pliers or your scissors, your cutters out of your garage or your kitchen cabinet. We have a really good selection here of bone cutters for hard corals, forceps, so you don't have to touch the corals, and what else, Brian?
Well, there's blades in there if you're cutting soft corals, whatever the case may be, but always just make sure you're using the right tool for the job. It's best if you've got something that's dedicated for this purpose. Like you said, don't grab the pliers out of the garage. Have something that all you do is use it for fragging. Keep it clean, rinse it off after every single use.
Very good point.
And if it's not gonna work for the coral, don't try, right? So if it's not gonna, like the bone cutters are not gonna cut through an A-can fastry or something along those lines, you're best off with a saw. Okay, mistake number 2 would be fragging unhealthy corals. So you don't want to go chopping up a coral that's not looking great or isn't in a great mood. So if you're not seeing a lot of polyp extension, you're seeing receding tissue, really pale colors, even like thin tissue, especially on an SPS or something like that, it's best to leave it alone, let it get back up to a healthy level before you try dicing it up.
Now, I will call out one exception to that. If you're seeing brown jelly diseases or RTN, rapid tissue necrosis, this is a really good way to try and prevent it from spreading.
And even in some cases, you could save the coral.
Exactly. Mistake number 3, fragging too frequently. When you frag your corals, it's going to cause stress to not only the colony, but also the frag itself. For example, Goniopora can take months to recover after fragging. You're going to see that in polyp extension like we mentioned a bit ago. Also, there's a number of reasons not to really kind of go at it all the time.
Right. I mean, unless you're farming a coral for economic reasons, there's no sense in chopping away at it all the time, right? If at the very least, you're gonna end up with an ugly colony. So the best thing you can do is just give it time to grow. If you see maybe biological warfare between different corals, maybe it's time to trim it back. If it's starting to outgrow the area of the tank that it's in, time to trim it back. If it's something big like a Goniopora or something along those lines, and it's just outgrowing the tank, maybe it's time to rehome. Mistake number 4, the wrong spot for the cut. You want to go in, make sure you're going with precision, have a plan, know what you're wanting to do and what you're trying to achieve there. Some corals can be damaged if you frag them in the wrong spot. A great example would be euphyllias. You got to make sure you get down low enough on that skeletal structure so that you don't cause damage to the tissue of the frag that you're trying to create.
Yep, have a plan. It's a great way to look at it. One more thing to keep in mind, if you have a large colony and you start fragging it, a lot of that coral is going to be exposed to light that it hasn't seen before, right? It's been covered up until now, so just keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, or even the coral beneath it, right?
It's very true.
And as always, anytime we cut a coral, you're exposing the tissue, right? So just like your skin, you're cutting it open, you're allowing infection to get in there potentially. So reducing the number of times you cut, reducing the number of times that tissue gets damaged, is going to provide you with healthier frags.
And mistake number 5, improper handling of your corals. Corals have flesh, it's delicate. What you don't want to do is go mishandle them. Use tools like we talked about earlier.
Yeah, use gloves. Try not to use your bare hands if you can. There are oils on our skin that can cause damage to the coral, and some of that stuff you just don't want in your tank anyway. Additionally, if you're dealing with really small frags, you want to take extra care not to damage that tissue. The least, if it's a very tiny SPS frag, use forceps, whatever the case may be. Just try not to cause too much damage to the tissue.
That leads us to number 6, choosing the wrong adhesive. Super glue is great, probably the most popular option. My only issue with this stuff is every time I open it, I use the whole tube, and it gets everywhere, no matter how careful I am.
Yeah, to help with that, always make sure you use a gel super glue rather than just a regular old liquid. That's gonna help you out a bunch. But it really, for me, it depends on the use case, like how you're mounting the coral, where you're mounting it, what you're mounting it on, right? So everything's gonna be a little different, for just a plug sometimes and a small SPS frag or something, sometimes just a little dab of super glue works. If it's something larger that you need a better base on, something like coral gum or even epoxy, could be better. Now, the epoxy, you're gonna probably wanna use a combination of epoxy and super glue because the epoxy itself is an adhesive. But whatever it is, just make sure that coral is nice and secured. It's not gonna fall off, roll away, get knocked off by a crab or something like that. If you're talking about soft corals, there are lots of different ways to do that, to adhere it. I've used fishing line in the past, zip ties, even a rubber band. Wouldn't necessarily recommend the rubber band thing, but There are lots of different ways you can do it as long as that coral stays on the plug long enough for it to grab a hold and crust a little bit and really get settled in. All right, mistake number 7 would be inadequate care for that new frag. If you're gonna make frags, you're gonna put them in a refugium or you're gonna put them in a frag tank, whatever that setup is, it needs to mimic the environment that that frag came from. You can't just put it in the dark, you can't put it into a tank with no flow. That coral's just not gonna be happy about it. You've already put it through the stress of the fragging process. If you don't give it the environment that it needs, you're probably not gonna have much success.
Yes, keep it in, light that it's used to, flow that it's used to, not too much to where it blows off the rack or blows off the freshly adhered to plug.
Right.
Also, maybe add some carbon. If you don't run carbon all the time, add some carbon for the tank, for some chemical warfare. Just be proactive rather than reactive.
Right, and additional flow, having that flow in that tank is also gonna help it clear off any of that stress slime, any coral dip, anything like that that you've added to it.
And number 8, not having a plan for those frags. Do you have a frag rack? Do you need to get a frag rack? If you have a reef tank, you should probably already have one. Are you gonna bring it to your local fish store? Maybe try to sell a frag? Are you gonna swap with your friend? Bunch of possibilities. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think going into it, just knowing that you're gonna produce some frags, you need to, make sure you've got everything you need, have all the proper tools, frag plugs if you want those. I personally, you can even use rubble from the aquarium. We actually have, a bag of big rubble back here, so it doesn't matter what it is, just have a plan for what you're going to do with those frags. And if you're gonna take them to, is it gonna be a frag swap? Is this gonna be for a friend? If it's for a friend, give them a nice big chunky piece. You can trade, swap things out, grow your collection, whatever the case may be. But have some kind of a plan going into it. Otherwise, you're just gonna end up with a display tank with a bunch of pieces of coral laying all over the ground. So those are our top 8 coral fragging mistakes that we've made in the past. We'd love to hear if you've got any to add.
Yep, drop a comment down below with your mistakes and we'll see you next time.